I never thought my life would turn into a story people needed to hear. I was just a wife trying to hold a quiet marriage together, believing that loyalty lived in routine and love survived silence. From the outside, my life looked stable, even enviable. Inside, something was slowly breaking, piece by piece, while I pretended not to notice. This is not a story about screaming fights or dramatic exits. It's about how cheating hides in calm spaces, how betrayal often whispers before it screams, and how truth waits patiently to be seen. I'm sharing this because I know someone listening right now feels the same confusion I once felt. If that's you, stay with me. What started as a quiet doubt became a truth that changed everything, including me. I used to believe silence meant safety, the kind that keeps a marriage standing even when the walls start to crack. Daniel and I had been married for 11 years, and from the outside, our life looked calm, almost boring in a respectable way. We waved at neighbors every morning, hosted small dinners, and posted smiling photos on holidays. People often said we were lucky, and I used to believe them. Inside our home, everything ran on routine. Coffee at 7, work by 8, dinner by 7 again. Nothing seemed broken enough to question. But quiet can hide an affair just as easily as it hides love. And I learned that truth slowly, painfully, one ignored detail at a time. It started with small things I brushed away because facing them felt heavier than pretending they didn't matter. Daniel began keeping his phone face down on every surface. If I asked who he was texting, he'd smile and say, "Just work stuff." His meetings ran late, but never with clear details. When I asked how his day went, his answers felt practiced, like lines he'd memorized. One evening I said, "You seem distracted lately," and he replied, "You're imagining things," with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I told myself I was overthinking because that felt safer than admitting something might be wrong. I talked myself out of suspicion daily. "Marriage gets dull," I'd whisper while washing dishes. "This is normal." Still, my chest felt tight in moments that should have been easy. One night, while folding laundry in the living room, Daniel's tablet lit up on the couch. I wasn't snooping, it was right there, glowing, impossible to ignore. I didn't open the message, didn't touch the screen, but the preview was enough. 2 words, "Miss you." My hands started shaking, and I remember sitting down slowly like my legs forgot how to work. Those words weren't meant for me. Daniel never said "miss you" anymore. My mind raced, trying to find excuses. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe it was family. But my heart already knew. When Daniel walked in, I quickly locked the screen and forced a smile. He kissed my forehead and said, "Long day," like everything was normal. That night, he held me in bed and talked about future plans. "We should repaint the kitchen," he said softly. "Maybe take a trip next summer." I stared at the ceiling, listening, while something inside me quietly cracked. I wanted to scream, to ask him who he missed, but fear held my tongue. I felt betrayed but trapped between curiosity and denial. I needed proof, not just pain. The next morning, I watched him more closely. When he laughed at a message, my stomach dropped. When he stepped outside to take a call, my chest burned. I asked casually, "Who was that?" He replied, "Just a client," without hesitation. That confidence almost convinced me again. Almost. I started noticing how careful he'd become. Passwords changed. Screens turned away. A life carefully guarded from the woman sharing his bed. One evening at dinner, I said, "You've been distant." He sighed dramatically and replied, "You're reading into nothing." "I'm tired." I nodded, apologized, and hated myself for doing it. I called my sister that night. I didn't accuse him. I just said, "Something feels off." She asked, "Do you think he's cheating?" The word felt too sharp to repeat. "I don't know," I said. "I just feel invisible." She told me to trust my instincts. I wanted to, but instincts don't come with proof. Days passed, heavy and slow. Daniel became sweeter in public, colder in private. One afternoon, I asked, "Are you happy with me?" He paused just a second too long before saying, "Of course." That pause haunted me. I promised myself I wouldn't rush into confrontation. I needed the truth, not excuses. I decided to stay calm and watch carefully, even though every smile hurt. I kept notes in my head, tracking patterns, times, reactions. I wasn't proud of who I was becoming, but I felt like survival required awareness. One night, as Daniel slept beside me, I listened to his breathing and realized I no longer felt safe in his honesty. I stared at the dark ceiling and admitted something I'd been avoiding. If there was cheating, I deserved to know. Not for revenge, not for drama, but for my sanity. Silence no longer felt like protection. It felt like a prison. I was standing at the edge of a secret that refused to stay buried, and deep down, I knew the truth was already waiting for me. Over the next week, I became a quiet observer in my own life, like a guest walking through rooms I once owned. I watched Daniel the way you watch a stranger on a train, careful not to be noticed, afraid of what you might confirm. Patterns appeared the moment I stopped making excuses. He stepped outside to take calls at the same times every evening. His mood lifted after certain messages, then flattened when he noticed me watching. One morning I asked, "Did you sleep okay?" He answered, "Yeah," without looking up, thumbs busy on his phone. Another day I said, "You seem happy today," and he replied, "Just productive," too quickly. Each small moment stacked on the last, forming a picture I didn't want but couldn't unsee. I hated the person I was becoming, suspicious and silent, but pretending ignorance felt worse. I started checking the clock when he left work, noting delays that had explanations but no details. When I asked, "Who were you meeting?" he said, "Clients," again and again. One evening I joked, "Do these clients have names?" He laughed and said, "You're funny," then changed the subject. That laugh felt like a wall slamming shut. The turning point came on a quiet afternoon when Daniel rushed out for work and left his tablet charging on the kitchen counter. I noticed it right away. My heart pounded as if it knew before I did. I made coffee, paced, sat down, stood up again. I told myself I didn't want to snoop, but clarity called, louder than guilt. My hand hovered over the screen for a long minute before I unlocked it. I whispered, "I'm sorry," to no one, and opened the messages. What I found wasn't confusion or misunderstanding. It was an affair, carefully hidden behind polite lies and everyday normalcy. There were photos that felt too intimate to misunderstand, plans written in hopeful tones, and messages filled with comfort he no longer gave me. She knew about me. That truth cut deeper than the rest. One message read, "I hate hurting her, but I can't stop thinking about you." Another said, "She doesn't suspect a thing." I closed my eyes, breathing slowly, forcing myself not to scream. My chest tightened, but my mind became strangely clear. The fog lifted, replaced by a cold understanding. This wasn't a mistake or a phase. It was a choice, repeated daily. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands steady now, like my body had accepted the task. When I finished, I locked the tablet and placed it back exactly where it had been. I sat at the table until my coffee went cold, staring at nothing, feeling everything. That night, Daniel came home, cheerful. "You won't believe my day," he said, loosening his tie. I answered, "Try me," calmly. He talked about work, about stress, about traffic. I listened, nodding, thinking about how easily lies fit into his mouth. After dinner, I said, "We need to talk." He looked nervous for a second before smiling. "About what?" he asked. "I know about the cheating," I said quietly. The room felt smaller. He blinked. "What?" he asked. "I know about the affair," I repeated. He laughed nervously. "That's crazy," I said. I saw the messages. His face changed, color draining slowly. "You went through my things," he snapped. "That's what you're upset about?" I asked. He denied it at first. "You misunderstood," he said. "It's not what it looks like," I replied, then explained the photos. He sighed, rubbing his face. "You've been distant," he said. "I felt unseen," I answered. "So you cheated?" He shook his head. "It just happened," I said. "It didn't just happen every day." I didn't scream or cry. That surprised him. I stayed calm, my voice steady. "I have proof," I said. "I need time to think." He looked relieved, like silence meant forgiveness. "We can fix this," he said. "Let's not tell anyone." I nodded, not agreeing, just ending the conversation. Later, in bed, he reached for my hand. I pulled away. "I'm tired," I said. He turned over without arguing. As he slept, I stared into the dark, feeling something new rise where heartbreak used to sit. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. I opened my laptop quietly and reviewed the evidence again. I thought about every lie, every ignored instinct. I realized this betrayal deserved more than private pain. It deserved truth. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I wouldn't carry his secret alone. As I closed the laptop, I felt strangely calm. Daniel slept peacefully beside me, unaware that his carefully hidden life was already beginning to unravel. Revenge didn't begin with anger, the way movies make it seem. It began with patience, the kind that grows when you've already cried all the tears you had. I didn't yell at Daniel after that night. I didn't bring up the affair again. I became calm, almost gentle. and that scared even me. He mistook my silence for acceptance, maybe even weakness. One morning he said, "I'm glad you're being mature about this." I looked at him and replied, "I'm just being thoughtful." He smiled, completely unaware of what that thoughtfulness was becoming. I started gathering evidence carefully, like someone handling glass. I saved backups of messages, dates, photos, and time. I emailed copies to myself and stored them on a flash drive hidden in an old purse. I didn't want drama. I wanted truth that couldn't be twisted. Daniel loved control, especially of his image. He cared deeply about how people saw him. That was the key I held quietly in my hand. One afternoon, he mentioned his company's annual charity dinner. "You're coming, right?" he asked. "All the spouses will be there." I nodded. "Of course," I said. Inside, something clicked into place. That event mattered to him. His boss would be there. Friends, clients, people who trusted his words. I smiled to myself in the bathroom mirror later and whispered, "Perfect." In the weeks leading up to the event, Daniel tried harder at home. He brought flowers. He cooked dinner once. "I want us to move forward," he said. I answered, "So do I." That wasn't a lie. We just had different definitions of forward. One night he asked, "You're not going to embarrass me, right?" I looked at him calmly. "Why would I?" I replied. He laughed, relieved, and kissed my cheek. The morning of the charity dinner, I woke up nervous but steady. I dressed carefully, not flashy, just confident. As I zipped my dress, Daniel said, "You look amazing." I replied, "Thank you," and meant it. In my bag were copies of everything, neatly organized. Proof doesn't need emotion to speak. It just needs to be seen. At the event, the room buzzed with polite conversation and soft music. Daniel moved easily through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling wide. "This is my wife," he said proudly to everyone. I smiled back, thinking how strange it was to be introduced by someone who betrayed me. Dinner was served, and speeches began. When Daniel's name was called, he stood confidently and walked to the microphone. He spoke about integrity, loyalty, and trust. "These values guide both my career and my life," he said. I felt my stomach tighten, not with fear, but disbelief. The room applauded. When he returned to his seat, he squeezed my hand. "See," he whispered, "everything's good." I squeezed back gently and said, "Not yet." Later, the host announced an open microphone for brief personal acknowledgments. Daniel looked surprised when I stood. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Speaking," I replied softly. My legs felt heavy as I walked to the front, but my voice didn't shake. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Tonight is about honesty, generosity, and truth." The room grew quiet. I talked about marriage, about how appearances can hide reality. I said, sometimes the people we trust the most are living a secret life. Daniel's smile faded. I paused, then continued. "I learned recently that silence protects lies, not love." I took out the documents and handed them to the event coordinator, who projected them on the screen as arranged. Messages appeared, dates, proof, gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel stood up. "This is inappropriate," he said loudly. I turned to him and said, "So was the affair." The room froze. His boss looked stunned. A colleague asked, "Is this true?" Daniel couldn't answer. His voice failed him. Then came the twist even I hadn't planned to reveal until that moment. I said, "There's something else you should know." I looked at Daniel directly. "The woman you were seeing isn't just someone you met recently." Murmurs spread. "She works in your department," I continued, "and she was promoted 3 months ago, after the affair began." The room erupted. Daniel's boss stood abruptly. "We'll be discussing this," he said firmly. The mistress wasn't there, but her name hung in the air like smoke. Daniel sank back into his chair, defeated. I ended calmly. "Truth doesn't need shouting," I said. "It just needs light." I walked back to my seat, heart pounding, but clear. Daniel didn't touch me again that night. As people whispered and stared, I realized something important. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. But as I watched security approach Daniel and his boss ask him to step aside, I understood that this was only the beginning. The real consequences were just starting to unfold. The days after the exposure moved slowly, like time itself needed space to process what had happened. Daniel didn't come home the night of the charity event. I wasn't surprised. I slept alone in our bed for the first time in years, and instead of loneliness, I felt relief. The house was quiet, but not heavy. In the morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, coworkers, spouses, even distant relatives reached out. Some messages were short, "I'm so sorry." Others were longer, filled with shock and support. I replied to a few and ignored the rest. I needed silence again, but this time, it was chosen. Daniel came home late the next day. His shoulders were slumped, his confidence gone. "They put me on leave," he said quietly, standing in the doorway. I nodded. "I know," I replied. He looked at me like he expected comfort. "This didn't have to be public," he said. I met his eyes and answered, "Neither did your affair." He sat down heavily. "I lost everything," he whispered. I replied calmly, "No, you revealed everything." Over the next week, the truth continued to spread without my help. The company launched an investigation. The promotion was frozen. The mistress resigned before being questioned. Daniel tried to explain himself daily. "I never meant for it to go that far. I was confused." "I love you." I listened without interrupting, then said the same thing each time. "Love doesn't hide." One night he asked, "Can we fix this?" I answered, "I don't know how to rebuild trust that was intentionally broken." Friends came by with food and concern. My sister hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." That mattered more than she knew. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted clarity. In one session, the therapist asked, "What do you want now?" The answer surprised me. "Peace," I said. Daniel suggested counseling together. "I'll do anything," he said. I believed him. But willingness doesn't erase damage. One evening I told him, "I'm choosing separation." He stared at me. "Is this revenge?" he asked. I shook my head. "This is self-respect." The legal process was quiet and respectful. We divided things fairly. There were tears, but no screaming. He apologized again, this time without excuses. "I'm sorry I betrayed you," he said. I nodded. "I accept the apology," I replied, "but acceptance doesn't mean return." Months passed. The noise faded. Daniel moved out of town after resigning. The scandal stopped following him, but the consequences stayed. As for me, I rebuilt slowly. I redecorated the house. I traveled alone. I laughed again without forcing it. One afternoon, Daniel called. "I just wanted to say, I hope you're happy," he said. I answered honestly, "I am." After hanging up, I realized karma hadn't been cruel. It had been clear. It took away what was false and left room for truth. Today, my life is quieter again, but it's honest quiet. I trust my instincts now. I no longer confuse silence with safety. Betrayal thrives in darkness, but justice grows in light. Walking away wasn't easy, but staying would have been harder. I didn't win by exposing him. I won by choosing myself. If you've made it this far, I want you to hear this clearly. Cheating doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in routines, excuses, and quiet lies. And revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means truth, boundaries, and the courage to walk away. I didn't share this story to shame anyone, but to remind you that your feelings are valid and your instincts matter. If you're living with doubt, don't silence it to keep the peace. Peace built on lies will always cost more in the end. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you feel less alone, then telling it was worth it. Remember, choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival.